Hi there, welcome back to the Little Loonies. Currently, we are busy with our series, as you can call it, um, of the Halloween Jaunt in Pretoria. So, if you guys like it, please give us a like
and subscribe.
Yes, please subscribe to our channel if you want to see more of these videos, and mark your notifications so that you can actually get our videos. And if you have any other ideas of what we can do, leave a comment. We would appreciate it very much, guys. We need your support. So, our next video, we went to the Old Raadsaal in Pretoria.
Yes, and once we arrived there, first of all, our tour guide or jaunt guide, however you want to call him, he first told us about the old church square that was unfortunately destroyed, but we got a little bit about the place as well as the jail of Nelson Mandela where he was first held before his court case. And then lastly, we went into the Old Raadsaal where we first got told about some of the paranormal experiences there, some footsteps, people coming downstairs, and then he took us up and showed us some great things which I will show in the video. And after that, I think that was it. Then we went to our next location. So yes, there's a few things to learn about, not only the history of Pretoria but also the ghosts in Pretoria, and a few great recommendations for books and TV series. So go check it out.
Yeah, it's awesome.
With the most beautiful buildings, and they're trying to revive it now. They're holding festivals and all sorts of things. I'm very glad to hear that. Right, first of all, this used to be the market plain, okay, for the Afrikaans folk. And then they needed a place to have nagmaal, which in English is called communion. So they built a church, and the church used to be there where Paul Kruger's statue is. But unfortunately the church burnt down. So it's one of the only church squares in the world that I know of that doesn't have a church, except that it's a ghost church now. Okay. Now, before I tell you the story of the church square, and before we go to do the Raadsaal, I want to tell you about a building down that road down there. The building is a very plain looking building, it's very modern, and it's not important for you to see it. What is important is the story I'm about to tell you. When I was researching here 23 years ago, I went to the different buildings and I happened to go down the side street because somebody said there's a ghost story there that you need to go here. Anyway, I went to the building, I went to the lady that's supposed to tell me the ghost story, and I said, what's going on? And she said, well, my staff are complaining and my manager's complaining because every time I come here, the photocopy machine just switches on by itself. The kettle switches off when people want to switch it on. The lights start flickering. All sorts of strange things happen when I'm here, and there's lots of knocking sounds. I knew exactly what was happening when I heard the word knocking sound. So I said to her straight away, ma'am, are you undergoing any sort of stress? And she said, yes, I've just undergone a very, very difficult divorce. I've got post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety and depression, and I'm on very heavy medication. She was hospitalized for quite a while as well. I said, and how are you feeling now? She said, not that much better. I said, okay. There's no ghost that has attached itself to you, I will tell you what, is actually causing the phenomena. This is known as poltergeist phenomena. The German word poltergeist means the following. Polter, noisy. There's always these knocking or rapping sound. Okay? Geist means ghost. So I said to her, what you've got to do is, it's no use calling in a priest to come and exorcise the building, because you're not dealing with demons. You can ask a Sangoma to come and exorcise it. It's not witchcraft. It's not foolery, as they say in Afrikaans. It's none of these things. Okay? What happened to John? What's he done? He's having his own little ghost. So that's exactly what's happening. And then she did eventually go for therapy. And when she went to therapy, guess what happened? All the phenomena stopped. So it's no use, it's no longer known as poltergeist phenomena, it's called RSPK. So R stands for recurrent, because it happens again and again. Spontaneous for the S, okay, because it happens suddenly. Psycho, the mind, and kinesis, the movement. Okay. So recurrent, spontaneous, psychokinesis, RSPK is the proper scientific name. Okay. I thought I'd just let you know that, because at least you know about another type of paranormal phenomenon. Right, now turning to Church Square. Behind us is the Old Raadsaal. Okay. Now that was Paul Kruger's parliament in his day. Okay. Because now, if you think about it, in those days you had the Afrikaans folk in the Free State and the Old Transvaal, and the other two provinces were controlled by the British, which was Natal, as it was called, and the Cape Province. Okay? So we have a parliament here, and we have a parliament down in the Cape. We actually have two, but only the one in the Cape is the one that they use. Now, Paul Kruger was not happy that the building next door was higher than his. And what was that building? That was the President Hotel, it was the Grand Hotel, and eventually it became the headquarters of none other than the Standard Bank of South Africa. Alright, so what did Paul Kruger do? He was very clever. He added a tower. And then he added another tower above it. And then he added a statue above it. Right, now who is that statue? Well, no. That statue is, in Greek mythology, Athena, and in Roman mythology, Minerva. She's the goddess of war, magic, and the protector of the city. And she's usually depicted with an owl in her hand. However, if you look at that over there, you will see there is no owl there, she's got a spear. So they wanted to spread the protection and the magic. How did they do that? They moved the owl a bit further away to spread it. And so they put it on the corner of that building over there. Okay, this is in our way. So we're trying. There we go. See the top there? The owl sits on the top. If you all shine your torches collectively, you'll probably see it a little bit better. There we go. So the owl sits on the top. Okay. Now what's quite interesting about this building is, you see that clock there? It's the only Afrikaans clock in the whole of South Africa. Now you might think that sounds strange. What does that mean? Okay. In Afrikaans, if you say it is 1:30, how do you say it? 1:30.
1:30.
Is 1:30, 1:30. So when it's 1:30, it will ring 2.5 bells. I hope the tourists get to the airport on time. So it's quite interesting that we have an Afrikaans clock here. Okay, now another interesting thing. In the Second Anglo-Boer War, the Boers were marching onto Pretoria. I mean, not the Boers, the British. It was May 1900. Now Kruger had a problem because he had minted all of the Kruger millions, because they needed millions and millions of Kruger pounds or rands today to run the war, because wars are very expensive. And where were the Kruger millions minted? Well, at the mint, of course. And the mint is down there. It's not worth really seeing. It's just a very narrow. But what is important is that this building here used to be the Nederlandse Bank, and that's where the Kruger rands were stored. But when the British were marching over here to Pretoria, Kruger had to get rid of the millions very quickly. That's another story. If you look across the road over there, that over there is the most beautiful of our courthouses in South Africa, and it is called the Palace of Justice. Okay? And that is where the Rivonia trial was held with Nelson Mandela when he was imprisoned. Everybody talks about his prison there on Robben Island in Cape Town, but his first prison was right here. In fact, if you want to know where the prison is, you see where that car's just gone past there? Those lights at the very bottom, those are the cells. And that is where he was incarcerated. Now, what was Kruger going to do to get rid of the millions? Well, he quickly shifted the millions from the bank and he hid them in those very cells. Okay? And Deneef's rates in the history book writes as follows. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I saw wagons outside the Palace of Justice, and they were carting something from the cell. They were crates covered with cloth, and the wagons drove up Kruger Street towards the station, and they went onto a train which went eastwards. And of course today nobody knows where the Kruger millions are. We just don't know. But here's an interesting story. This building is made of sandstone. Some decades ago, one of the blocks, it doesn't say which one in the history books, but one of the blocks was crumbling, and so they had to go and fix it. And so when they dug inside the block to get the rubble out, before they then could refill it with some more sandstone, because they had to make liquid sandstone to fill it up, they came across an old pipe. The pipe is about 1/2 meter long, and it is sealed on both sides. So they shook the pipe, and when they shook the pipe, there was something inside, which to them they felt was perhaps a rolled up piece of paper. Guess what they did? They did not open the pipe, they put it back in the block and they sealed it. And we don't know which block it is. Now for all we know, maybe there's a map inside that pipe which might tell us where the Kruger millions are.
Let's break the bloody building down.
So break the bloody building down. Yes. So now you've got to go to every block and wonder which one it is. Come here with a metal detector tomorrow or during the week, and if you find it and you do open it, but don't see it, if it is the Kruger millions, I want 10%. Okay?
Which is fair.
Yeah. Well, that's the usual agent's commission these days. Could make it 20. So I just want to end off before we go into the Raadsaal and tell you all that, and that's a wow factor. You think going in, the castle is terribly boring inside. This here, fantastic. You'll see why. The stained glass window, everything is fantastic inside. Now, before we go inside, I want to tell you about Kruger's statue. I see his top. What if they put on his top hat? They they put like a duke on top or something. But anyway, that's his orange. That's his top hat. But anyway, now when they said they wanted to make a statue of Paul Kruger, the Krugers were very religious people, and in the Old Testament of the Bible it says you must not make a graven image of yourself. Now this is not peculiar only to the Christian or Jewish religion. It's also with Islam. For instance, Islam, you're not allowed to make a graven image of Muhammad. That is why you never see the face of Muhammad. I don't know if any of you know much about Islam, but they call him the faceless prophet because you're not allowed to make an image of And the same in the Old Testament, you mustn't make graven images. That's why if you go into a Jewish synagogue, you're never going to see statues. Okay, it's only in the New Testament. So if you go into a Christian church, then you will see statues, like statues of Jesus or the saints or those sort of things. But they were very glued to the Old Testament, and because of that they said, no, you can't make a statue. And the people begged and begged and begged and begged and begged and begged. Now, Kruger's wife was a very clever woman, and I'll be telling you about her ghost when we go inside now to the Halloween Jaunt. And she said, she came up with a very good idea. She said, I'll tell you what, make the top hat hollow. And that's exactly what they did. Okay? And when it rains, the top hat fills up with water. Pigeons then go there and they take a bath in it. And so therefore, ladies and gentlemen, that's how they got it erected, because it is not a statue. It is a bird box. It's a very, I love little trivial bits of information sometimes, just something extra that one learns, all right? So I'm glad you've had a good look at Church Square and know a little bit about it. Are there any ghosts in the Palace of Justice? Yes, there are. If you speak to the guards there, they say that the lift, when it comes from the basement, so just under those trees you see the lights in the cells there on the left side. There's also cells on the right, the ones you'll look up on the left. Then the lift comes to the ground floor, and then they hear footsteps, and when they go and look who it is, they see absolutely nobody, and the front doors are locked, and they can never find anybody inside the door. We don't know who those footsteps belong to, and I'm not going to pretend to know. I will only corroborate things that I actually know about and can be corroborated. But I can surmise the following, that it was probably one of the inmates who was in prison there, who died there under mysterious circumstances, probably tragic ones. You must remember in those days that prisoners would even kill each other for a box of cigarettes. So it's obviously a rather tragic situation, and those footsteps are pretty much still there and trying to look to solve their situation. So they are known as a crisis ghost. But I'll tell you more about that at the graveyard. Right, let us go into the wonderful Raadsaal. You might want to move across the original footing.
It's really gorgeous.
You just don't see places like this anymore. As I told you, the Erasmus Castle we were at inside, it's terribly boring inside. It's the outside that looks so impressive. Here, both the outside and the inside are extremely impressive. Just look at the work along there. Look at the scrolling. Look at the stained glass, how delicate that is. Can you imagine the amount of work that went into each little piece? Look at the staircase here. Look at the scrolling on the staircase. Where do you see this today? Just even look back there, look at that archway in there with all the decorations. You just don't see it. Behind me are what they call Nevolas. I collect quite a few. They cost a fortune. They're made out of spelter, which is tin and zinc. And they're normally mounted on staircases. They're usually at the bottom. And then they're called these newel posts. What about the ghosts in this place? Well, there's a very, very famous book, and it's called Mira wat praat. So that means walls that talk, which is actually quite nice. I kind of like that. And one of the stories is that there are ghosts that come down en masse, so that's in a group down the staircase. But the strange thing is, they disappear at the bottom. Now, why would that be? Well, first of all, why would there be any ghosts that come down in a group at We don't know, but we can surmise the following. There were a lot of casualties, injuries and deaths during the Second Anglo-Boer War. So we surmise that during the Second Anglo-Boer War, there must have been a gathering here at Parliament when the Boer people lost a lot of people on the battlefield, and they must have been highly emotionally stressed. And when they came down the staircase and were leaving, and they felt the stress the most, that stress was recorded onto the environment. Okay? So stress can cause two things. It can cause poltergeist phenomena, and it can cause an imprint on the environment. And that is known as a residual apparition. It resides on the environment. It's not a ghost. A ghost is a soul or a spirit. All right? These are not ghosts. These are residual apparitions. They're just recordings on the environment, and they replay themselves like a video. Okay? And this is known as the stone tape theory because it's imprinted on anything hard, which can be stones, brickwork, or something very hard like this hard mahogany wood. Okay. Why do they disappear at the bottom? Well, what's on the staircase that's not on the bottom?
Mahogany.
So they are imprinted onto the wooden staircase, the banister, and the poles and all that. And that stops at the bottom. So that is why the recording is no longer at the bottom. It's imprinted just onto the wood over here. Now, the strange thing is, on some of our tours, and people have taken photographs of the staircase, they have seen some fuzzy figures, but we have never got a very good photograph.
Okay, so as you guys can see, unfortunately our mics died, and we didn't really notice it. Thus, we lost a lot of audio footage, and therefore I decided to do a voiceover. Basically, after that, we just walked up the stairs and we went to the next room where the John's guide showed us the room, told us a bit about the history, like what the chairs were made of, and then he spoke about some occurrences there, as well as some of the old meetings they had. Then we also took a bunch of pictures. Like over here, you can see there's a picture of my mum, and then after that, there's a picture of me in Paul Creer chair. So that was quite fun, very interesting experience to sit in his chair. Then we also got to learn more a bit about Paul Creer and his wife. For example, the Jaunt guide also told us that a bunch of times Paul Creer wanted some advice. However, sometimes he didn't know who he could trust. But his wife was always a very wise woman with a lot of knowledge. Thus, she used to sit up in that balcony at the top level, and every time he would kind of suggest something, he would just slightly glance up and look at her, and she would sit with her fingers on the railing, and when she agreed with what he was saying, she would just subtly lift up her knuckle, and if she didn't agree, then she would just leave it down, and that way it would kind of be a way for them to communicate with each other during these meetings. Then we also played with an SLS camera in the room, because the Jaunt guide told us that there's usually a little girl that can be picked up sitting on the chairs or standing around there where Paul Creer's chair is. There were people that night that were able to catch her. For example, we also caught her the one time. Unfortunately, though, we were not able to withdraw the footage from the app that we used, but it did happen. Then we walked up and we looked at some of the paintings, discussed what was going on in them, and then lastly, he took us into one of the rooms where they kind of had functions, And he told us about this phenomenon that would sometimes appear in the dark. It almost appears like a swirly light figure that moves quickly across the room. And then he also told us roughly where it happened. As you can see there at the top, there's a bunch of windows. However, one of the window panes, for some reason, doesn't have a window. And that is the place where the light tends to move. And this is also one of the reasons why they think there might be the light. Maybe something happened and they had to close up the window there, but the window was taken out and now there's this phenomenon happening. Then, as you can see, there's a short clip of him showing the shadow of his hand on the light to kind of explain that this phenomenon isn't a shadow that's showing, since a shadow will have more fixed structures, whereas this light is kind of blurred and it's not very clear. He then did take us to stand against the wall and look at that all together. He turned off the lights in hope that we can see it. We stood there for about 10-15 minutes altogether. Some people saw the phenomenon, others, however, missed it completely. Personally, I saw it about 6 times in that time, and my mother did not see it. We discussed that later that night, which is quite unfortunate. But for some reason, even though I could see it, if I can explain it to you, it was like this green blurry light that just flashed quickly over that part where there's supposed to be a window, and then it would disappear. It would kind of start out of nowhere and then disappear again without a trace. It happened quite a few times. Sometimes it was more bright, sometimes it was a little bit dimmer, but I could see it nonetheless. I did try to catch it for you, but unfortunately the camera didn't pick it up. I'm not quite sure why, but I did try, and unfortunately it did not happen.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.